Mistress lied about her pregnancy to trap a millionaire. His real wife exposed the ultimate truth. Secrets, lies, and hidden desires. This is the story of how one man's world was turned upside down by a cunning mistress who claimed she was pregnant to seal her luxurious future. When Frederick Miller, a charismatic millionaire, found himself caught between the woman he vowed to love forever and a newcomer burning with ambition, everything he believed about loyalty and truth shattered. His unsuspecting wife, Vanessa, was determined to uncover the facts, refusing to be cast aside. A tangled web of betrayal, manipulation, and buried regrets began to unravel. Little did they know, the ultimate betrayal carried devastating consequences no one could have foreseen. Frederick Miller was not born into wealth. He built his empire brick by brick, deal by deal, forging an unstoppable reputation in the world of real estate investment. At 42, he carried himself with the confidence only self-made men possess, the sort of poised assurance that turned heads whenever he entered a room. For most of his adult life, he had been married to Vanessa Miller, a woman whose grace matched his ambition, whose love had propelled him through countless storms. The Millers lived in a penthouse overlooking Central Park in New York City. It wasn't just any penthouse, it was a masterpiece of architecture, an emblem of Frederick's success. When guests stepped into that lavish space on the 67th floor of an upscale building, they gazed in awe at the panoramic views of the city that never slept. The living room boasted floor-to-ceiling windows, and by day, it allowed the sunlight to wash across every inch of handcrafted teak floors. By night, it presented the dazzling skyline that had lured so many dreamers to Manhattan. Vanessa adored their life together. She had been an active partner in many of his real estate ventures. Warm-hearted, witty, and compassionate, she not only accompanied Frederick to high-stake investor meetings and extravagant galas, but was also the rock that grounded him. She was a pillar of the philanthropic community, heading charity events to help the homeless, raising funds for children's hospitals, and ensuring she used the couple's resources for good. With her presence, Frederick was not just a wealthy man, he was a respected figure who showed up for philanthropic causes across the city. And it was at one such charitable event held at the Waldorf Astoria that everything changed forever. On a crisp winter evening, the Millers arrived at the annual Children's Heart Foundation Gala. The city was in full holiday swing. Lights sparkled along the avenues, elegant wreaths adorned ornate hotel doors, and crisp air carried the perfume of roasted chestnuts from street vendors. The Waldorf Astoria's grand ballroom dripped with crystal chandeliers, the floors polished to a mirror-like sheen. A live jazz band played softly in the background, setting the perfect mood for conversation and generosity. Vanessa looked radiant in an emerald gown that complemented her deep brown eyes. Frederick, tall and dark-haired with streaks of silver at the temples, wore a classic tuxedo and charmed everyone with his warm smile. They were the picture of poise and prosperity, drawing polite nods and enthusiastic welcomes from other high-profile guests. The couple circulated the room, greeting acquaintances, discussing real estate prospects with potential investors, and pledging donations to the cause. And that was when Elena Briggs entered Frederick's line of sight. Elena was 27, with striking features and luminous blonde hair that tumbled down her back. She wore a fitted red dress that spoke volumes, brazen, confident, and eye-catching in a room filled with subdued, formal attire. She had volunteered at the check-in table for the event, greeting every donor as they arrived. But her focus that evening was singular. She had her eye on Frederick Miller. Elena approached the couple, introducing herself in a voice as silky as her curves. She gushed about how much Frederick's philanthropy meant to the charity. Vanessa smiled courteously, politely asking questions about Elena's involvement with the organization. Frederick, feeling an immediate jolt of fascination he struggled to rationalize, found himself leaning forward, intrigued by the younger woman's intelligence. She presented herself as well-informed and passionately dedicated to fundraising. That evening, Elena lingered near Frederick. They shared scattered glances across the ballroom. Every time Vanessa turned to speak with an old friend or business associate, Elena miraculously appeared. Whether it was to offer Frederick champagne, to ask him about his latest real estate endeavor, or simply to whisper a sly compliment about how he and Vanessa were such an inspiration, Elena ensured Frederick's attention was never far from her. Vanessa, deeply engaged in conversation with board members, remained blissfully unaware of the intensity brewing in the background. But Frederick felt it. A hush of guilt occasionally pricked him at how intently he engaged with Elena, yet he couldn't tear himself away from this woman who seemed to exist solely to captivate him. When the evening drew to a close, Vanessa excused herself for a moment to speak with the event organizer. Elena and Frederick found themselves side by side. Elena touched Frederick's arm gently and murmured, "Your generosity tonight was extraordinary. We raised more than we expected because of you. If you'd like any follow-up materials or more details on how your donation is being utilized, please let me know. I'd be happy to share coffee sometime." The invitation was soft, but tinged with a flirtatious undertone he couldn't miss. Frederick hesitated only for a moment before taking Elena's business card. He told himself this was purely professional, another contact in the city. No harm in that. "Thank you," he responded politely. "I might take you up on that." Elena smiled, an enigmatic tilt to her lips, and it was a smile that promised more than mere coffee. Thus began a chain of events that would shatter the foundations of Frederick's life, testing the bonds of loyalty, love, and morality. A week after the gala, Frederick found Elena's business card in his jacket pocket. Before he could convince himself of any moral imperative to stay away, he dialed her number under the guise of wanting to learn more about a new charity project. A small meeting, he told himself, something brief and harmless. They met at a quiet coffee shop near Bryant Park, a humble setting for a man of Frederick's stature. Elena arrived wearing a flattering yet conservative outfit, offering a contrast to her gala extravagance. The conversation began innocently enough. The charity's progress, improvements to be made, potential new philanthropic ventures. But the more they spoke, the more Frederick recognized the unmistakable tension between them. Elena was no naive volunteer. She quickly proved she understood real estate trends, dabbled in small personal investments, and thirsted for bigger opportunities. One cappuccino turned into two, and their professional talk wove into personal stories. Elena shared that she grew up in a small town, dreaming of escaping to New York's bright lights. She described her early struggles, working menial jobs, always pushing to gain a foothold in philanthropic circles to meet people of influence. Hours flew, and by the time Frederick walked out of that coffee shop, he felt a bizarre mixture of excitement and dread. A blossoming guilt clung to him as he returned home. Vanessa was her usual warm self, greeting him with a loving smile and a kiss. He pushed any guilty feelings aside, telling himself it was a casual connection. A friend at best, or a colleague in philanthropic circles. That was it. But Elena had lit a spark that refused to be extinguished. A few days later, he invited her to an upcoming real estate seminar where he was a keynote speaker. He rationalized it as giving her an opportunity to expand her knowledge. She arrived, taking a seat in the third row, beaming up at him like a devoted admirer. After the seminar ended, they shared a late dinner. It was during that dinner that the lines between them shifted irrevocably. In a corner booth at an upscale bistro, Elena placed her hand on Frederick's. She spoke in a low voice, sweet as honey, I'm so grateful for your mentorship, Frederick. Not just professionally, you've shown me a world I never knew. Her eyes shone with what looked like genuine admiration. I feel so alive when I'm with you, she added. Frederick's heart thundered in his chest. He could almost see the ring on his finger glinting in accusation, but there was something so enticing, so powerfully magnetic about Elena. She made him feel young and invigorated, like the unstoppable dreamer he had once been. He knew he was on the edge of a slippery slope, yet he still took her hand, giving it a subtle squeeze. What started as a gentle squeeze turned into a clandestine affair in the coming weeks, shrouded in deceit and stolen glances, fueled by adrenaline and the sense of escaping the constraints of his predictable life. Frederick convinced himself that it was harmless as long as no one else knew, and Elena, sensing the power shift in her favor, played the part of his most ardent devotee. She was generous with praise, relentless in her flattery, and seemed to worship every step he took. Still, even as the affair grew, Frederick continued to keep up appearances at home. He remained the attentive husband, engaging in philanthropic events with Vanessa, and showing up to society fundraisers. If Vanessa suspected anything, she gave no indication. She appeared content and proud of their partnership, never dreaming that while she slept, her husband's phone would buzz with late-night messages from another woman. Elena was a skilled manipulator. She recognized that Frederick was not only wealthy, but also possessed a conscience. He felt pangs of guilt for betraying Vanessa, and this guilt made him susceptible, hungry for reassurance that he was still a good man, that perhaps in some twisted reality he deserved a measure of happiness Elena provided. So Elena crafted a narrative. Frederick was underappreciated at home, overshadowed by Vanessa's own philanthropic achievements, relegated to a secondary role even though his brilliance had built their empire. None of this was true. Vanessa was deeply supportive, always proud of Frederick's accomplishments. She never sought to overshadow him, but Elena's words seeped into Frederick's mind like a toxic virus. He began to question whether he was truly satisfied in his marriage or if Vanessa truly understood him. Each lie Elena whispered lodged itself in Frederick's doubts. Over dinner at an upscale Japanese fusion restaurant, Elena half-whispered, "I just want to be there for you in ways no one else can. I can see how much pressure you're under. Let me share that burden." She leaned forward, her eyes glimmering with enticement. "I'm the one who truly understands you, Frederick, and I'm not here for your money. I'm here for you." Those words, ironically, resonated in the worst possible way. Frederick had come from a life of struggle. He'd run from gold diggers all his youth. Elena's claim to want only him, not the fortune, stroked his ego. It was a lie he wanted so desperately to believe that he clung to it, ignoring any red flags. But red flags did appear. Subtle at first. Elena's sudden mentions of her financial hardships or her laments that her landlord was raising her rent, though she somehow always appeared in the latest designer outfits. Frederick offered to help in small ways, co-signing a lease, fronting some funds for her short-term investment projects. She looked grateful, overwhelmed, but kept protesting she didn't want to burden him. She played the push and pull expertly, letting Frederick offer more each time. Then she dropped the biggest bombshell of all. Frederick was in his office at the cusp of finalizing a lucrative property deal when his phone started buzzing incessantly. Usually, he set aside personal calls during business meetings, but the repeated vibrations were impossible to ignore. When he glanced at the screen and saw it was Elena, a sense of alarm coursed through him. He stepped into the hallway and answered, tension knotting in his gut. Frederick came Elena's trembling voice, her tone thick with anxiety. We need to talk. It's important." His mind raced. What could possibly be so urgent? "I'm in the middle of a negotiation," he whispered, carefully ensuring his associates couldn't overhear. What's going on? I'm pregnant. Time seemed to stop. His heart pounded in his ears. Pregnant? The word echoed like a gong inside his skull. Are you sure? Yes, she replied between sniffles. I've taken 3 tests, and they're all positive. I don't know what to do. Frederick's mouth went dry. A swirl of emotions overcame him. Fear, guilt, panic, and beneath it all, a fleeting wave of excitement that unsettled him. But any elation was overshadowed by a sinking dread. He was married. How would Vanessa react? How would the world react? Frederick, Elena's quivering voice cut through his cacophony of thoughts. Please, the first so scared. I can't do this alone. The rest of that day rushed by in a haze. He stumbled through his negotiation, barely coherent, though decades of business acumen helped him mask his inner turmoil. The moment he could, he rushed to Elena's apartment. She met him at the door, tears streaking her cheeks, showing him the positive home pregnancy tests. She insisted she had an appointment with a doctor in a week to confirm everything. But her eyes glistened with a mixture of terror and hope, like she was clinging to him for dear life. We'll figure this out, Frederick said, wrapping her in a hug. His voice sounded foreign in his own ears. He felt as though he was standing outside himself, watching a man he no longer recognized. I'll be there for you. The next several days were an emotional blur for Frederick. At home, Vanessa asked if he was feeling unwell. He was distant, anxious, consumed by something unspoken. He mumbled excuses about work pressure. She offered her unwavering support, massaging his shoulders and telling him how proud she was of his upcoming project. Meanwhile, in stolen moments, he pressed Elena about possible options. Did she want to keep the baby? If she did, then what? Elena insisted she wanted the child. She assured Frederick that, despite her own fears, she believed he would be an incredible father. He felt torn to pieces. He imagined his life with a new baby who shared his blood but not his marital vows, and the devastation it would bring to Vanessa. 1,000 different nightmare scenarios played out in his mind. But Elena had him cornered. Every time he wavered, she reminded him that her finances were meager. She would have no choice but to turn to public resources, or perhaps even reveal everything to the media if he tried to abandon her. Frederick was too intelligent to miss the undertones of subtle blackmail, yet he found himself paralyzed, too riddled with shame to fight back. Vanessa noticed the change in Frederick's demeanor long before she uncovered the truth. A woman who had built her life with him through thick and thin, from near bankruptcy to abundant success, does not simply miss the signs of distress in her partner. His late-night returns became more frequent, his phone calls more secretive. He had always been open, leaving his phone on the kitchen counter or living room table. Now, he guarded it, turning the screen away or silencing calls at odd hours. Initially, Vanessa attributed it to the high-stress business expansion Frederick was spearheading. But after a particularly cold interaction, where Frederick snapped at her over a trivial matter, she recognized the distinct tang of betrayal in the air. Deep in her gut, a primal fear took root: infidelity. Instead of confronting him immediately, she waited, biding her time. Vanessa had always been methodical, even-keeled, never one to jump to conclusions without evidence. She began observing patterns: the phone calls from unknown number, the barely concealed text messages he would receive late in the evening, the occasional slip of his tongue about meeting a colleague who never made it onto his schedule. While rummaging through some files, she found a strange receipt for an expensive dinner for 2 at a restaurant she had never visited with him. Slowly, doubt and suspicion metamorphosed into certainty. Her beloved husband was seeing someone else. Vanessa cried in private, tears stinging her eyes as she pictured Frederick with another woman. She felt humiliated, enraged, heartbroken. But she was not a woman to break easily. She decided she needed proof. She considered hiring a private investigator, an extraordinary measure that once would have felt unthinkable. But her heartbreak and the ever-growing suspicion overshadowed any moral reservations. If Frederick was truly betraying her, she needed the truth in black and white. She discreetly contacted an investigative firm recommended by a friend in the philanthropic circuit. They specialized in high-profile marital disputes, ensuring confidentiality. Within days, the detective assigned to her case began trailing Frederick, and it did not take long for them to spot him meeting a slender blonde woman in a quiet, upscale bar. A camera caught them in various stages of embrace, confirming Vanessa's worst fears. When Vanessa reviewed the photos and read the detective's detailed report, heartbreak and fury warred within her. Her first instinct was to confront Frederick, to scream, cry, and demand an explanation. But the detective's parting words haunted her. "Something about this woman is off, Miss S. Miller. She seems too practiced. My guess is she's not in this for love." Vanessa's logical mind took hold. She decided to wait, to dig deeper. She wanted the full scope of this woman's motives. She collected more information: Elena's name, background, her previous employment, even some rumored relationships. And a disturbing pattern emerged. Elena had a history of seeking out affluent men, forging short-lived relationships that often ended with threats or hush money. Sick to her core, Vanessa recognized that her husband had fallen for a cunning manipulator, just as the detective had suggested. Yet, there was one piece of intel she didn't see coming: the rumor that Elena was claiming to be pregnant. Heart-pounding, Vanessa tried to confirm. The detective couldn't procure an official medical record, but there were whispers among Elena's acquaintances that she had boasted about snagging a golden ticket by hooking a millionaire and faking a pregnancy scare. Vanessa's vision blurred with tears as she absorbed this possibility. How far had Frederick gone with this affair? And was he aware of Elena's alleged scheme? The more Vanessa mulled it over, the more determined she became. She would protect her marriage, her dignity, and Frederick from the claws of this con artist, if it wasn't already too late. Elena recognized that, despite the power she seemed to wield by claiming she was pregnant, her position was precarious. She understood that Frederick's guilt would either keep him by her side or drive him to desperation. To maintain her hold on him, she had to be relentless, carefully orchestrating every conversation, every plea for help. It wasn't merely about the money, though her extravagant lifestyle depended heavily on Frederick's secret payments. It was also about validation and revenge against a world that had never afforded her the comforts she believed she deserved. Late one afternoon, Elena waited anxiously in the tastefully decorated apartment that Frederick had leased in her name, a place she had insisted upon, citing the stress of pregnancy and her need for a calmer environment. The apartment itself was proof of Frederick's growing entanglement: plush furniture, expensive artwork, and even a well-stocked refrigerator filled with imported groceries. She had convinced him it would be best for the baby if she could live somewhere peaceful, away from the noise and clutter of her previous residence. Frederick had agreed, transferring yet more funds to cover rent and upkeep. Each day, Elena found new ways to ensure he never forgot his so-called obligations. If she sensed Frederick pulling away or hesitating, she would launch into stories of morning sickness, dizzy spells, or sudden bouts of fatigue. She called at odd hours, sometimes in tears, to report imagined emergencies like mild spotting or phantom cramps. When he arrived, anxious and breathless, she would calm him, whispering that his presence was all she needed to feel safe again. Thus, she transformed his guilt into a sense of paternal duty, tying him to her whims. Frederick, for his part, was trapped in a relentless cycle of dread. Every time his phone buzzed with an incoming text or call, his heart lurched. It could be Elena asking for another injection of cash or leveling subtle threats. Or it could be Vanessa, his wife, wondering about his whereabouts. At night, he tossed and turned, torn between keeping Elena placated and maintaining the facade of a devoted husband at home. His once firm moral compass felt hopelessly adrift, battered by shame and fear. He found himself simultaneously resenting and pitying Elena, resenting her manipulations, pitying her for whatever emptiness drove her to spin such a twisted scheme. One evening, he arrived at the apartment straight from a tense board meeting. Elena greeted him in a silky robe, her blonde hair arranged in a deliberately messy style that suggested both vulnerability and seduction. The lights in the living room were dimmed, casting a gentle glow over the space. A sense of unease rippled through Frederick as he stepped inside, aware of how easily he could lose control of the situation. Elena cast him a small, tremulous smile. "I've been waiting," she murmured, her hand fluttering to her abdomen as though cradling a precious secret. "You never texted me back about the ultrasound appointment. Don't you care about our baby's health?" Frederick's stomach twisted. He had been avoiding the topic, quietly hoping he could put it off until he found a better strategy, until he discovered how to confront the truth he was beginning to suspect, that something about this pregnancy felt off. Yet whenever he doubted her, he reminded himself of his own culpability. He had slept with her, encouraged her affections. Could he blame her for wanting security? "Elena," he began, voice tight, "I'm not trying to avoid you, but you have to understand, I can't just walk away from Vanessa, from my commitments. People talk. If I vanish every evening or show up to medical appointments out of the blue, she'll become suspicious." He sighed, forcing himself to maintain calm. "I need more time." Elena's eyes narrowed, the flicker of bitterness behind them impossible to miss. "Time?" she echoed, pressing her palm against the curve of her belly. "A baby doesn't wait for you to be ready, Frederick. You either step up or—" She paused, and her expression turned icy. "Or I'll have to find someone else who can help me through this. I might even have to go public." His eyes widened at that last statement. She knew precisely how to wield the threat of scandal. Even if she did not drop his name directly, gossip could spread like wildfire in circles where Frederick was well known. The tarnish on his reputation might cost him not just his marriage, but also business partnerships and professional credibility. A wave of anger surged in his chest, but it was immediately displaced by raw panic. "Don't do that," he muttered, tension thrumming through his body. "I'll handle it, okay? I'll make sure you have everything you need. Let's not talk about going public or dragging anyone else into this." Elena's features softened into a triumphant pout, as though she were the vulnerable victim. She slipped her hand into his, gently tugging him toward the couch. "I'm not trying to threaten you, Frederick," she cooed. "I just don't want to be left alone in this. It's your baby, too." Swallowing hard, he let her guide him, sinking into the plush cushions. Her perfume enveloped him, heady and sweet, and he felt the undeniable weight of her expectation. He remembered Vanessa waiting at home, Vanessa, who had once given up her own career ambitions to support his real estate ventures, the woman who believed in him even when no one else did. He pictured her face, radiant with devotion, never suspecting how badly he had broken their vows. "Trust me," Elena said softly, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "I'm the only one who understands what you're going through. Vanessa doesn't know the pressure you're under. She's never seen your vulnerability like I have. Let me be here for you." Frederick stared at her, flooded with a profound sense of revulsion at what he was doing, and at the same time overcome by a paralyzing fear of losing everything if he dared to cut her off. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably another message from home, but he ignored it, torn between the life he had built and the tangled mess he had created. And so Elena's hold on Frederick deepened. Every doubt he voiced, every attempt he made to disentangle himself, was met with renewed pleas, reminders, or outright threats. She took pains to appear as a fragile mother to be in need of saving, even as she subtly tightened the financial and emotional rope around his neck. As the weeks crept by, Frederick's guilt-driven compliance only fueled Elena's confidence that her scheme was working and that, should he ever waver, she still had one final, devastating trump card, the public fallout he dreaded above all else. Vanessa, armed with her detective's report, decided one night that she'd had enough. She had spent weeks managing the pain, letting Frederick think she was unaware, gathering more evidence, formulating a plan. But when he came home late again, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers, a quiet wrath took over. She confronted him in the kitchen. "Frederick," she said softly, placing her hands on the marble countertop as though for support. "Who is Elena Briggs?" Frederick froze. For a split second he considered lying, feigning ignorance. But the stoic resolve in Vanessa's eyes told him that she already knew. He swallowed hard, his heart hammering in his chest. He began, but words evaded him. Vanessa pressed forward, tears glistening in her eyes. "She's the woman you've been seeing, isn't she?" Her voice trembled with a mix of fury and heartbreak. "The one you're paying, the one you're hiding carrying your child?" His eyes snapped to hers, a wave of nausea flipping his stomach. How do you know?" Vanessa's breath caught. So it was all true. Her heartbreak momentarily overwhelmed her. Anger, betrayal, agony, they all roiled together. She closed her eyes, steadying herself, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I hired a private investigator," she said bluntly. "I know more than you think." Frederick stared at her, shame constricting his throat. He tried to reach out, but she recoiled. "Please, let me explain," he pleaded, voice ragged. "It just happened. I never meant to—" "You never meant to?" she echoed, her tears giving way to a burning resentment. "You slept with this woman, spent our money on her, and now she claims to be having your baby. So don't tell me it just happened." He bowed his head, remorse searing him from the inside. "I was weak," he managed. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness." For a long, painful moment, they stood in silence. Finally, Vanessa asked, "Is she really pregnant?" "Yes," he rasped, though an odd feeling of uncertainty clouded his mind. Elena had never shown him a legitimate doctor's report, only the tests she'd done at home, and a vague mention of an upcoming appointment. "She says she is." Vanessa inhaled sharply. "Have you been to any doctor's appointment with her?" A flicker of confusion darted across Frederick's features. "Not yet, but I'm planning on going." Vanessa nodded once, resolute. "We're going together. I want to see the medical confirmation with my own eyes." He opened his mouth to argue, but the implacable fire in Vanessa's gaze silenced him. Though he was terrified of Elena's reaction, he found a strange sense of relief. Maybe this was for the best. A chance to confirm the truth. Elena was startled when Frederick informed her that he and Vanessa would be joining for her upcoming prenatal appointment. She stammered excuses, saying the clinic was small, the timing inconvenient. But Frederick, emboldened by Vanessa's steadfast presence, insisted Elena had no choice but to relent, though not without an undercurrent of panic vibrating through her voice. The day arrived under a grey sky. The three of them stood awkwardly in the clinic's modest waiting room. Elena clung to Frederick's arm, trying to display ownership. Vanessa stood a little apart, quiet, her jaw set. Other pregnant women sat flipping through magazines, some with supportive partners, some alone. The tension between the trio was palpable. When Elena's name was called, she led them to an examination room. The doctor, a pleasant woman in her mid-50s, frowned slightly at the unusual gathering, but proceeded with professional courtesy. She asked Elena routine questions about her symptoms, her medical history, her last, menstrual period. Meanwhile, Vanessa observed every twitch, every hesitation. Then came the moment of truth. An ultrasound. The doctor prepared Elena, applying the cool gel to her abdomen. Frederick felt his heart pounding like a thunderous drum. If Elena was indeed pregnant, this image would seal their fates. If she was lying, the doctor slid the transducer across Elena's abdomen, eyes scanning the monitor carefully. A tense silence filled the room. Seconds stretched like hours. Frederick's breath caught in his throat. Vanessa clenched her fists, bracing for heartbreak. Elena's eyes darted nervously to the monitor. Finally, the doctor's measured, professional voice broke the quiet. "Elena, are you certain about the timing you gave me?" Elena swallowed, nodding. "Yes, of course." The doctor angled the monitor so that Elena, Frederick, and Vanessa could see. The screen showed the grainy image of an empty uterus, no fetal sac, no heartbeat, nothing. "I'm not seeing any sign of a pregnancy," the doctor said gently. "We should run some blood tests, but based on the ultrasound, you are most likely not pregnant at this time." Elena flushed, her face turning ghostly pale before brightening with defensiveness. "This machine must be faulty," she snapped. "I took multiple tests at home. They were positive." The doctor didn't budge. False positives can happen, but they're rare. "Let me run a blood test to confirm. It's the most accurate way." With that, Elena had no escape. She sat upright, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. She glanced at Frederick for help, but he stared back, the devastation and anger forming a storm in his gaze. Vanessa's voice sliced through the tension. "We'll do the blood test," she said firmly. No more excuses. Later that afternoon, they convened in the doctor's small office to review the blood test results. The tension was as thick as smoke. The doctor folded her hands on the desk, addressing Elena carefully. "Your HCG levels are not elevated. There is no evidence of pregnancy. The verdict was absolute." Elena opened her mouth, then closed it, her complexion ashen. Frederick was livid. He stood, jaw tense, fists clenched at his sides. Vanessa's expression was unreadable, but her voice trembled with barely contained outrage when she spoke. "You lied," she whispered. "How could you do this?" Elena reached for Frederick's arm, desperately. "Frederick, I don't understand. The home tests were positive. Maybe it was a chemical pregnancy, or I lost it somehow. You have to believe me." She dissolved into a flood of tears. Frederick recoiled. For the first time, he saw her tears for what they were: manipulation. He felt fury clawing at his insides, but also a staggering sense of relief. "Stop lying," he growled. "You never showed me a doctor's report. You never let me be there for any earlier appointments. All this time, you just took my money, told me you couldn't work, that you needed a new place to live, and it was all based on a lie." Elena's tears took on a shrill pitch. "But I love you. I only did it because I was afraid of losing you, of losing the security." "Security," Vanessa cut in icily. "There it is. You wanted money and status. You almost tore our lives apart for greed." Elena trembled, glaring at Vanessa. In that moment, the gentleness she'd tried to show Frederick gave way to seething resentment. She knew she had lost. She attempted a final card. "Frederick, are you really going to believe her over me? After all we've shared?" Frederick inhaled sharply, decades of moral conflict swirling through his mind. He turned to Vanessa, whose pain was evident in her teary eyes. Despite everything, she had come here for him, to reveal the truth. He looked back at Elena, seeing clearly for the first time the manipulative web of deceit. "I was a fool to believe you," he said quietly. "Don't ever contact me again." Elena's face contorted with rage and desperation. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, she let out a strangled sob and fled from the office, leaving a suffocating silence in her wake. Frederick found Vanessa in the hallway after Elena's dramatic exit, leaning against the wall, face buried in her hands. Guilt surged through him. He gently touched her shoulder. She stiffened but didn't jerk away. Slowly, she raised her head, revealing eyes red from crying. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, voice hoarse. "Vanessa, I betrayed you in the worst way." She regarded him for a few moments. He was prepared for her to yell, to slap him, to walk out of his life forever. Instead, she drew a shaky breath. "I can't pretend this will be easy to forgive," she said, her voice taut with hurt. "But I also can't turn away without giving us a chance to fix things. We've been through so much together. I just need time." Frederick nodded, tears burning behind his eyes. "Anything. I'll do anything to make this right." They left the clinic side by side. No comforting arms looped around each other, no easy conversation. Just two people who once promised to love and honor each other, now navigating the wreckage of betrayal. After Elena stormed out of the clinic, she went on a rampage of phone calls, texting Frederick relentlessly. At first, she threatened to go to the press with her story, to tarnish his reputation and drag his name through the mud. Frederick, swamped with guilt and anger, ignored her messages. He was busy grappling with the fallout at home, trying to salvage any vestiges of trust with Vanessa. When her threats yielded no response, Elena changed tactics. She begged for forgiveness, claiming she'd done everything out of love and fear. She told him that she'd planned to get pregnant for real, that she wanted to be the mother of his child. Frederick recognized the manipulative pattern, but part of him still felt pity. He remained silent. The messages continued, bouncing between fury and apology. Desperation fueled Elena's next steps. She tried to barge into Frederick's office building one afternoon, only to be escorted out by security. She confronted him in the parking garage, her voice cracking as she pleaded for a second chance. He refused, turning away coldly, leaving her alone in the echoing space. The final blow to Elena's scheme came when she realized her carefully constructed life was crumbling. The rent on the new apartment, no longer funded by Frederick, became too much for her to bear. Her credit cards, maxed out in pursuit of designer wardrobes and lavish dinners, caught up with her. When she couldn't keep up with payments, she faced eviction. She tried reaching out to old flames, men she'd manipulated before, but word of her deception had spread. She'd burned too many bridges. One night, she packed a suitcase and checked into a cheap motel, her funds dwindling rapidly. From a luxury apartment near Manhattan's elite to a cramped, musty room smelling of cigarette smoke, Elena felt the sting of karma's swift backhand. She had no allies left, no sugar daddies to bail her out. She was alone, bitter and broke. Frederick and Vanessa remained in a state of fragile coexistence. They continued living in the penthouse, but the emotional distance between them was profound. Frederick insisted on attending marriage counseling. Vanessa hesitated, her pride was wounded, her trust shattered. Yet, a love forged over decades can be stubborn, refusing to vanish under the weight of a single betrayal. She agreed, hoping to find closure, clarity, or at least a path to healing. In those counseling sessions, Frederick confessed the emptiness and restlessness that had led him astray. Vanessa revealed how discarded she felt, especially after devoting her life to supporting him. They revisited the early days of their marriage, the laughter, the late nights planning for their future, the storms they'd weathered together. They recalled how each challenge had brought them closer. This time, though, the challenge had come from within. Frederick knew redemption would not come easily. He cut ties with Elena unequivocally, blocking her number and ceasing all communication. He wanted to prove to Vanessa that she was his priority. He apologized daily, not just with words but through actions, surprising her with home-cooked meals, planning thoughtful outings, and being fully present. He cleared his schedule for therapy appointments. Slowly, bit by bit, he tried to show her that he was willing to do the hard work to earn back her trust. Vanessa, for her part, wrestled with conflicting emotions, her love for Frederick and her heartbreak at his betrayal. Some days, the pain and bitterness rose like a tidal wave, and she wanted to lock him out of her life. Other days, she remembered the depth of their partnership, how they had lifted each other during times of despair. She clung to the hope that they could come out stronger on the other side. It was not a linear journey. Setbacks happened, a careless reminder of Elena, a news article referencing the real estate scandal around a suspicious mistress. Each time, it ripped open the wound, but they learned to lean on each other, to share their fears and regrets openly. Without honesty, there was no path forward. Some months after the scandal, Frederick discovered that Elena had attempted to approach certain tabloids with her story. But her credibility was ruined. The tabloids sniffed out that the pregnancy story was a hoax. No respectable news outlet was willing to tarnish their reputation by publishing a piece from a known scam artist. Frederick's legal team, already prepared, had threatened defamation lawsuits if any false claims were printed. Faced with potential legal battles and financial ruin, Elena was forced to retreat into obscurity. Eventually, the private investigator Vanessa once hired furnished them with updates. Elena had been evicted from the apartment Frederick paid for, sank into credit card debt, and was couch surfing among former friends in Queens. Even those friends, it seemed, were running out of patience. Gossip circled that she'd tried to trick another wealthy man in a bar, only to be laughed out of the place when someone recognized her from the fiasco with Frederick. Karma had arrived with brutal efficiency, leaving Elena in the same desperate state she had been before meeting Frederick, if not worse. She had built a castle of lies and watched it collapse. Meanwhile, Frederick and Vanessa had the chance to rebuild, stronger if they chose to persevere. 6 months after the confrontation at the clinic, Frederick arranged a surprise renewal of vows. He had spent those months proving that he could be the husband Vanessa deserved. He took her on weekend retreats away from the city. They devoted more time to philanthropic causes together, and he made certain her voice was heard in every major life decision moving forward. Vanessa was hesitant at first when he proposed the vow renewal, uncertain if it was merely a grand gesture. But his consistent sincerity reassured her. He wanted to reaffirm their commitment in the presence of close friends and family, to symbolically bury the memory of deceit and begin anew. On a warm summer evening, in the gardens of a close friend's estate in the Hamptons, they stood facing each other amidst twinkling fairy lights. Vanessa wore an ivory sheath dress, understated yet elegant. Frederick donned a tailored suit, looking both nervous and hopeful. A small crowd gathered, only those who mattered, people who had supported them through the ordeal. Tears glimmered in Vanessa's eyes as Frederick slipped a new ring onto her finger, representing a fresh start. They spoke heartfelt vows, acknowledging their struggles, promising honesty, respect, and loyalty. Vanessa's voice broke when she said, "I choose us, Frederick, not because it's easy, but because we have something worth fighting for." Frederick's throat tightened as he responded, "I will spend every day of my life proving myself worthy of your love." Their vows concluded to gentle applause. Though heartbreak had scarred them, the couple stepped forward into the next chapter of their marriage. It would not be perfect. No real marriage is. But the foundation they now built was rooted in honesty forged through the crucible of betrayal and forgiveness. A few weeks after the vow renewal, when Frederick thought life had finally settled, he received an unexpected call. The number was blocked, but he answered out of habit, only to hear the trembling voice of Elena Briggs. He froze, mouth dry. "What do you want, Elena?" She let out a shaky breath. I'm in trouble, Frederick. Money trouble. I'm about to be on the streets. No one else will help me. Frederick's heart pounded with anger. What makes you think I will? She whimpered. Because we had something. Even if you hate me now, I'm desperate. I'll do anything you ask. Just please help me. I'm begging you. He closed his eyes, recalling how he once felt pity for her. But that pity had nearly cost him his marriage, his integrity, and his peace of mind. He remembered the heartbreak she inflicted, the lies, the manipulations, the blackmail. The memory stung, but so did a flicker of compassion. Yet he couldn't ignore what she had done to Vanessa, to them. Resolute, he hardened his tone. Elena, you destroyed your own life with your lies. You used me, threatened my family. I owe you nothing. He paused, letting the silence weigh heavy. Don't ever contact me again. He hung up, breathing unevenly, the final chapter of that toxic liaison sealed. She tried calling back multiple times, but he blocked the number, determined to preserve the sanctity of the life. He was rebuilding with Vanessa. It was an echo of the consequences Elena brought upon herself. Her manipulative web had finally strangled her. Time passed, and with each day, Frederick and Vanessa found a steadier rhythm. They learned to communicate more openly, to express frustrations before they festered, to celebrate each other's successes wholeheartedly. Therapy sessions became less frequent, transitioning from crisis management to building a healthier dynamic. Though the memories of the affair haunted them, they managed to transform the pain into lessons. They realized they'd allowed their once vibrant connection to slip into complacency. Frederick recognized his vulnerability to outside praise when he felt undervalued in his marriage, a problem he could have avoided by communicating his feelings. Vanessa acknowledged she sometimes gave so much to philanthropic causes that she forgot to nurture the personal bond with her husband. Their shared accountability sparked a renewal of closeness they hadn't felt in years. Professionally, Frederick's real estate empire continued to flourish. He handled his affairs with renewed integrity, determined never to let personal failings bleed into business decisions again. Vanessa expanded her philanthropic efforts, often collaborating with Frederick to ensure their giving was aligned and purposeful. They became a beloved power couple in New York once more, radiating a renewed unity that society watchers noticed and admired. Meanwhile, Elena's fate remained uncertain, but occasional rumors hinted at her continued struggles. She bounced from one short-lived arrangement to another, never regaining the stability she craved. It was the ultimate lesson in how deceit can devour a life, leaving nothing but regret. The Millers, however, refused to let that dark chapter define them. Their marriage was not perfect, no union ever is, but it became stronger in the broken places. Like a bone that heals and becomes more resilient at the fracture site. They moved forward together, hand in hand, living proof that love can endure when nurtured with honesty, respect, and forgiveness. Betrayal, heartbreak, and manipulation tore Frederick and Vanessa Miller's world apart. Yet through resilience, honesty, and forgiveness, they seized a second chance at building something even stronger. Their story reminds us that no marriage, no matter how solid, can withstand secrecy, and no deception can hide forever from the light of truth. Elena Briggs's grand scheme collapsed under the weight of her lies, serving as a stark warning of how greed and manipulation often backfire in the most devastating ways. In the end, love prevailed for those who chose transparency over illusion. Thank you for joining us on this intense journey of twists, turns.
He was the dashing mogul every ambitious entrepreneur wanted to emulate. She was the poised, loyal wife who had stood by him from humble beginnings. No one would have guessed that behind the gated mansion's manicured lawns, betrayal festered like poison. Until one day, In a flurry of financial sabotage, he let his mistress cut off his wife's credit cards. It was humiliating, scandalous, and only the beginning of a whirlwind that would pit powerful business alliances against each other. In a boardroom confrontation that stunned everyone, the CEO himself stepped in, but not in the way anyone expected. Buckle up. This is the story of love, greed, and revenge. Jordan Alberts was not born into luxury. He grew up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Milwaukee, where he learned to hustle by selling candy bars door to door at the age of 10. Over the years, Jordan's unwavering determination and charm propelled him into better circles. First at a local startup, then into his own tech company that caught the eye of an angel investor. By the time he was 35, Jordan was a self-made millionaire, a prominent figure on various entrepreneurial boards, and had connections with people like Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, and a few top executives at Google. His wife, Elizabeth Alberts née Wagner, had been with him through everything. They met in college at a small tech entrepreneur club meeting, both bright-eyed and dreaming of changing the world. Elizabeth came from a modest background, too. Her father was a retired auto mechanic, and her mother a homemaker. She'd studied communications with an emphasis on public relations, and it was through Elizabeth's network of contacts that Jordan first gained access to small local pitch events. While Jordan pitched his innovative software for automating small business tasks, Elizabeth made calls, arranged coffee meetups, and tried to capture the interest of potential backers. They married in a little chapel by Lake Michigan. It wasn't a lavish wedding, no star-studded guest list, no fancy reception at the Ritz. But to Jordan and Elizabeth, it felt perfect. A union built on genuine love, unwavering support, and a shared dream of building a life and a business empire together. Over the next decade, they grew from a modest condominium in Milwaukee to a stunning estate in Austin near Lake Travis, with a sweeping view of the water and rolling Texas hills. It was there at a philanthropic event organized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that Jordan's name landed on the radar of top-level investors. His company's smart automation technology was recognized for its potential to transform not just small businesses, but large-scale manufacturing and logistics. Soon after, Jordan's net worth skyrocketed from a mere $5 million to well over $200 million. For a while, everything was picture perfect. The marriage was strong, their personal synergy unwavering. Elizabeth handled some philanthropic duties, organizing events, acting as a goodwill ambassador for Jordan's brand, and forging new partnerships through her PR background. Their household staff adored them, describing Elizabeth as kind, gracious, and always mindful of the people around her. But money can be a seductive force, and success can open doors to darker temptations. Jordan began attending more exclusive networking events in Beverly Hills, New York, and beyond. Elizabeth was often at his side, but there were times she couldn't attend. Perhaps she was busy finalizing the details for a charity gala, or maybe she was simply burnt out from the unrelenting schedule. It was during these times, rare at first, then increasingly common, that Jordan got close to someone else. Her name was Ava Monroe. She was a rising star in the world of technology law, representing high-profile clients like Tesla, Amazon, and a few top-tier cryptocurrency exchanges. She had a reputation for being ruthless in negotiations, seductive in social gatherings, and unbelievably charming behind closed doors. The rumor mill started buzzing the moment Ava was seen at Jordan's table during a private dinner after a tech summit in Las Vegas. Elizabeth wasn't there. She had chosen to stay in Austin, meeting with a team of female entrepreneurs Jordan was mentoring. A few people whispered about Jordan's visible fascination with Ava, the way he leaned in whenever she spoke, how they clinked champagne flutes, with an intimacy that suggested more than just business talk. No one knew for certain how fast or how deep it went, but soon the signs became undeniable. Lavish gifts appeared on Ava's social media, including a diamond bracelet, suspiciously similar to the ones Jordan's company had once gifted important clients. Photos emerged of Jordan and Ava at high-end restaurants in Manhattan, always carefully angled to obscure Jordan's face, though keen observers could still identify him by the sliver of a recognizable watch or the faint reflection in a mirrored wall. By the time the rumors reached Elizabeth, they were no longer rumors, but near-confirmed facts. She felt her chest tighten, her world spinning out of control. This couldn't be real. Jordan had always been a loyal partner. But the evidence was too compelling to deny. She confronted him in the privacy of their Lakeview mansion. At first, Jordan denied everything. Yet denial quickly turned into a half-hearted admission once Elizabeth presented him with photographic evidence, like a skilled negotiator used to controlling deals. Jordan tried to manipulate the situation, insisting that Ava was just a business associate, someone he occasionally had dinner with. But Elizabeth saw right through it. She had always been adept at reading him. A chill settled over their once loving home. Elizabeth, determined to preserve her dignity, demanded they enter marriage counseling, or at the very least step away from high-profile events until they resolved their issues in private. Jordan nodded, providing non-committal answers. He had never liked therapy, never seen the point in discussing feelings with a stranger. He agreed to her wishes on the surface, yet beneath the facade, he continued his involvement with Ava, allowing the illicit relationship to take root. This was the calm before the storm. For soon Elizabeth's sense of betrayal would pale in comparison to the massive financial and emotional blow about to come her way. Weeks passed. Elizabeth tried to focus on her philanthropic work and personal projects, attempting to distract herself from the growing chasm between her and Jordan. When a local charity she sponsored invited her to discuss future donations, Elizabeth discovered something shocking. Her personal credit card was declined. Embarrassment washed over her in front of the unsuspecting staff. She tried another card. Sure, it must have been a glitch, but that too was declined. The staff politely suggested she call her bank, and Elizabeth excused herself with a polite smile, her hands trembling as she left the office. Elizabeth called the bank suspecting fraud or an administrative error. But the bank's representative informed her that both cards had been cancelled the previous week. Under their joint account, they were tied to Jordan's finances, and evidently Jordan had authorized the cancellation. It felt like a punch to the gut. Why on earth would Jordan cancel her cards without her knowledge or consent? They had never had major financial disputes. Elizabeth always had access to family funds, albeit responsibly. She dialed Jordan, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent him several frantic texts. No response. Later that evening, Jordan came home exuding an air of tired disinterest. Elizabeth confronted him the moment he walked through the door. Under the chandelier's glow, which reflected in her tear-filled eyes, Jordan brushed aside her questions with a dismissive wave. "I needed to consolidate our finances," he said, removing his blazer. "You can use the joint checking account for a while." "No big deal, no big deal." Elizabeth's frustration swelled. "You cancelled my credit cards without even telling me what's going on. Are you punishing me for something?" Jordan's eyes flicked away nervously, and that was when Elizabeth realized he was lying again. The next words that came from his mouth were not only shocking, but also laced with a cruelty she never imagined he was capable of. "Ava suggested we revisit some of my expenses. She found that you were spending frivolously. It made sense to limit credit usage." Elizabeth's heart dropped to her stomach. Ava. That woman was now meddling in their finances. As if the affair wasn't enough, Jordan had allowed this mistress to encroach into an arena that Elizabeth believed was sacred, her own household stability. What is Ava doing reviewing my spending? Since when does your fling get to decide what is or isn't frivolous? Elizabeth spat tears, threatening to spill. Jordan made an attempt at a calming gesture, but his words only fanned the flames. She's helping me restructure. Her firm has great insights into corporate finances. This is about the business, Elizabeth. It's not personal. Not personal. Elizabeth recalled how intimately personal their marriage had always been. They built every aspect of their lives together, from small decisions about wallpaper colors to big entrepreneurial leaps that demanded everything from both of them. Now Jordan was shutting her out, consulting Ava instead. In a quavering voice, Elizabeth demanded, "Reinstate my cards. I am your wife. I have a right to our finances, and you know I've never been irresponsible with money." Jordan's face hardened with a new arrogance. "Not until we finalize our restructure," he said, referring to some nebulous plan Elizabeth knew little about. "I'll handle everything in the meantime." That moment, that cold exchange, was a harbinger of the bigger heartbreak to come. If Jordan was letting Ava control such details, what other aspects of their marriage was he willing to let her sabotage? As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth discovered one more blow after another. The monthly allowance she used to cover household expenses had been slashed without explanation. The staff, including her personal assistant, was laid off. Bills began piling up, addressed to her name, but with no means to pay them aside from groveling at Jordan's feet. Friends and family started to notice. Elizabeth tried to hide her shame. She confided in her sister Caroline, who was enraged at Jordan. "This is financial abuse," Caroline insisted. "You should speak to a lawyer." Elizabeth shuddered at the thought. She still believed they could salvage their relationship, that Jordan would snap out of whatever daze Ava had put him in. Yet a small part of her whispered that maybe Caroline was right. Then came a fateful meeting at a hotel conference suite in Los Angeles, one that Jordan had insisted Elizabeth attend. It was a gathering of major tech moguls, including Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who were rumored to be there to discuss new tech innovations in global logistics. When Elizabeth arrived, she quickly realized something was off. She saw Jordan in the lounge area, standing far too close to Ava, exchanging hushed conversations. Seeing Elizabeth from a distance, Jordan slipped away discreetly, leaving Ava behind. Elizabeth approached her husband with a forced smile. "I'm here," she said, desperate to maintain composure. "What's the plan?" Jordan gave a curt nod. "There's a closed-door session for the key players only. You'll have to wait outside." In the past, Elizabeth had always been included in these key player sessions as Jordan's partner and PR advisor. The subtle exclusion burned her pride. She swallowed her anger. "Sure, I can wait." After hours of waiting, she found Jordan and Ava laughing together near the bar. As she approached, Jordan's phone buzzed, and he stepped away. That was when Ava turned a chilling smirk on her face. "You know Jordan's a visionary," Ava said, swirling the wine in her glass. "He needs someone who can keep up with him on all levels: business, ambition, excitement." Elizabeth felt her face flush with anger. "I've been by his side for years. We built this together." Ava gave a theatrical shrug. "Maybe in the past. But times change. People evolve. I guess you were too comfortable." Elizabeth clenched her fists, biting back a retort. She was determined not to make a scene in front of such influential people. But oh, how she wanted to lash out, to expose Ava for the home wrecker she was. Ava flicked her hair behind her shoulder, noticing Elizabeth's agitation. "Things will be better if you accept it," she cooed, as if offering advice to a friend. Jordan's moved on in more ways than one. The finances are just the beginning. Elizabeth's body went cold. She realized in that moment how truly precarious her situation was. Ava was not simply a fling. She was positioning herself as a partner in Jordan's professional and personal life. The credit cards were just one step in what looked like a systematic campaign to push Elizabeth out of everything she and Jordan had built. Still, Elizabeth refused to crumble. She left the event quietly, but her mind churned with rage and heartbreak. It was time for her to take action. She needed to protect herself, her assets, and her dignity. Little did she know that as she plotted her next move, Jordan and Ava were preparing a financial ambush that would push her to the brink. Only fate and an unexpected intervention by a certain CEO would alter the course of their twisted game. In the days after the Los Angeles conference, Elizabeth attempted to consult with attorneys. She picked up a referral from a friend who once worked with a high-profile divorce lawyer in New York. The initial phone calls were sobering, with Jordan's empire being primarily under his name and her credit cards cancelled. She had limited liquidity to hire top-tier representation. Even so, Elizabeth pressed forward. She managed to scrape together some funds from a personal savings account. Jordan had no access to money she had set aside from her early PR consulting days. It wasn't a large sum, but enough to secure a preliminary consultation. During that consultation, her lawyer, Michelle Liu, a bright and empathetic but hard-hitting attorney based in Houston, laid out the hard truth. Financial abuse and infidelity are serious grounds for divorce, Michelle said, scanning through Elizabeth's financial statements. But if Jordan's funneling money and assets into new accounts under his own name, or shifting resources to places you can't see, we need proof, and we need it fast. Elizabeth swallowed. She recounted Ava's involvement, how she was effectively orchestrating the restructuring. Michelle's pen scribbled quickly over a notepad. "You have a right to half of the marital assets, Elizabeth, but it looks like your husband is 2 steps ahead. We must move quickly." The plan was to gather evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing and file a court order to freeze marital assets, ensuring Elizabeth had a fair shot. But as they began drafting documents and rummaging through what records, Elizabeth had an avalanche of shocking details surfaced. Jordan wasn't merely cancelling credit cards. He was transferring stocks from their joint portfolio into an account under his newly formed trust. He had changed the authorized signatory details for a few of their properties, effectively locking Elizabeth out. He was also taking out lines of credit against certain properties, presumably to fund new ventures that, as Elizabeth suspected, involved Ava. The emotional strain weighed heavily on Elizabeth. She couldn't sleep, her appetite waned. Each day felt like standing at the center of a storm. Yet if she thought this was the worst of it, she was mistaken. One evening, after finalizing some documents with Michelle, Elizabeth returned to her mansion to find her keycard didn't work on the electronic locks. Pounding on the door, she shouted for the live-in staff if any were left. Seconds later, the door opened slightly, revealing Ava's face. "Jordan's not here," Ava said icily. "You should call next time." Elizabeth's heart hammered. "This is my home. Get out of my way," she demanded, trying to push past. But Ava slid in front of her, refusing to budge. "He told me you're not welcome here anymore until the legal mess is settled." Ava sneered. "I have every right to ask you to leave." Elizabeth was trembling with fury. You have no rights here. You're the mistress, not the wife." With a cold laugh, Ava stepped aside and pointed at Elizabeth's luggage haphazardly placed in the foyer. "Jordan left these for you," she said. "He said to pack whatever else you need and let security escort you out if you refuse to leave." Elizabeth blinked away tears, her throat raw with outrage. She was being thrown out of her own home by the woman who had intruded into her marriage. That moment was a cruel epiphany. Jordan had not only cut off her finances, but now he was physically pushing her out of the place she had shared with him for years. Yet in all that darkness, a sliver of light emerged the next morning. Elizabeth received a phone call from a close mutual friend, Marcus O'Donnell, who worked with Jordan at a large tech conglomerate in Dallas. Marcus was someone Elizabeth trusted, an executive who had known Jordan since the early days. He had seen them build the company from the ground up. Elizabeth Marcus said, his tone urgent. "I don't know everything that's going on, but I heard from your staff that you've been locked out. There's a board meeting next week. Jordan wants to finalize some big decisions. If you can get to that meeting and talk to the chairman, maybe you can find some leverage." Elizabeth's breath caught in her chest. The chairman of this particular conglomerate was none other than famed CEO David Hartridge, known not just for his visionary leadership, but also for a strict code of ethics. Over the years, Hartridge had invested heavily in Jordan's business. He was the reason Jordan sat on that board. "He's not the type to meddle in personal affairs," Marcus warned. "But if Jordan's pulling stunts that compromise your share in the company, Hartridge might step in. He's big on fairness and hates scandal." It was the glimmer of hope Elizabeth needed. She thanked Marcus profusely. The plan was simple: attend the board meeting, confront Jordan in front of Hartridge, and present enough evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing to ensure the board and possibly the entire conglomerate would not stand for it. She spent the week gathering documents, bank statements, and text message screenshots that implicated Jordan in unscrupulous financial moves. Michelle Liu helped compile everything into a neat folder. "You need to be prepared for Jordan to lash out," Michelle warned. "He'll try to discredit you in front of the board." Elizabeth nodded her determination, overshadowing her fear. She practiced her speech, reciting it in the mirror of her modest hotel room, where she had temporarily moved. Heart pounding, she told herself that if there was ever a time to fight, it was now. Finally, the day of the board meeting arrived. Elizabeth dressed in a sleek black pantsuit that radiated confidence. She walked into the corporate skyscraper in downtown Dallas, her chin held high despite the knot in her stomach. She spotted Jordan in the corridor, flanked by Ava, and a couple of the board members. As soon as he saw Elizabeth, his expression darkened. "You're not supposed to be here," Jordan said, trying to keep his voice low. Elizabeth raised her chin. "I'm still an investor in your company. I hold shares. So yes, I'm attending the board meeting." Ava stepped in with a condescending smile. "Don't make a scene, Elizabeth. This meeting is for serious stakeholders." "I am a serious stakeholder," Elizabeth retorted, voice steady. "I'm your wife, still legally, and I'm half of this empire's foundation." Behind them, a tall figure approached CEO David Hartridge himself, a man in his 50s with graying temples and a firm handshake. He regarded Elizabeth with polite curiosity. "Ms. Alberts, I presume?" Elizabeth nodded, handing over her invitation papers and a letter from her attorney, which stated that she possessed partial shares. Hartridge studied the documents, then gave a curt nod indicating she was allowed to attend. Jordan shot Elizabeth a glare that spoke volumes. You have no idea what you're getting into. But Elizabeth did. She was here to preserve her dignity, her livelihood, and the legacy she had helped build. The meeting commenced in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline. The board members sat around a large mahogany table exchanging pleasantries about the upcoming quarter's projections. Jordan made a short presentation on a new partnership with a logistics firm, highlighting expansions and new contracts. A few board members clapped. Then came time for open discussion. Elizabeth raised her hand, clearing her throat. I'd like to address some concerns about the financial structuring Jordan is proposing. She began, her voice reverberating across the silent room. Jordan's face reddened. Ava, seated beside him, tried to intervene. We should keep personal matters out of board discussions, she said. But Elizabeth pressed on, raising the folder of evidence. These changes aren't just personal, Elizabeth said. They could affect company stability. Jordan is funneling resources into a new trust making questionable decisions without transparency. I have documents signed by him with references to Ms. Ava Monroe demonstrating a conflict of interest that could potentially compromise investor trust. A hush fell over the room. Hartridge's brow creased. Jordan, is this true? Jordan stood, scrambling for composure. This is a personal matter. Elizabeth is overstepping her bounds. She's not. Hartridge replied, his voice sharp. If there's a conflict of interest that threatens the stability of our partnership, it's very much a board matter. Jordan's eyes darted between Hartridge and Elizabeth. For the first time, he seemed cornered, uncertain how to proceed. Ava shot Elizabeth a lethal glare, realizing that Elizabeth's boldness had forced the topic into official territory. The tension was palpable. Elizabeth's heart thumped so loudly, she was certain everyone could hear it. But she stood her ground. Continuing. I also discovered lines of credit being taken against marital properties to fund expansions. These expansions could be legitimate, but the details are obscured. I have reason to believe Ms. Monroe is manipulating these finances for her personal gain. Murmurs rippled through the board. A couple members exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who might have sided with Jordan seemed rattled by the magnitude of Elizabeth's accusations. Hartridge steepled his fingers, evaluating the situation. I propose we recess for 15 minutes. Jordan, Elizabeth, Miss Monroe, please step into my office. Jordan inhaled frustration etched across his features, but he couldn't refuse the CEO's request, not without causing a catastrophic scene. The three followed Hartridge into a glass-walled corner office, shutting the door behind them. In that tense, enclosed space, the real battle began. Elizabeth laid out her evidence on the polished table before Hartridge. Jordan tried to dismiss it all as a personal dispute, but Hartridge was no fool. He could see the potential for scandal, especially if a partner was using company infrastructure for personal vendettas. Throughout this heated exchange, Ava attempted to deflect blame. She portrayed herself as a legal advisor, merely suggesting financial moves, disclaiming any wrongdoing. But Elizabeth's carefully compiled documents suggested otherwise. Emails, text messages, and proposed legal documents bore Ava's digital fingerprints. Hartridge's expression darkened. Jordan, this is unacceptable. If these documents are authentic, you've put your personal entanglements ahead of corporate responsibility. I won't allow it under my leadership. Jordan's face went pale. He tried to protest, to label Elizabeth's claims as overblown, but Hartridge had already made up his mind. Until this is sorted out, Jordan, I'm placing your proposals on hold. We can't move forward with any major financial changes if they're under this sort of ethical cloud. Elizabeth felt a surge of relief, a faint vindication. While she hadn't resolved the core issue of Jordan's betrayal, at least the board wasn't letting him run roughshod over her financial future. But Jordan, cornered and embarrassed, lashed out in desperation. "You can't shut me down like this," he snapped at Hartridge, voice tight with anger. "I'm the one who made that original deal with your conglomerate. You need my innovation." Hartridge stood up, bristling at Jordan's tone. "I'm the CEO, and you've just made me question your reliability and integrity. Watch yourself, Jordan." Ava stepped closer to Jordan, placing a hand on his arm to calm him, but he shrugged her off. "You'll regret this," he warned Hartridge, then turned to Elizabeth. "And you made a fool of me in front of everyone." Elizabeth clenched her fists, refusing to cower. "You did that to yourself," she said, voice trembling with both fear and resolve. Jordan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Ava followed quickly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Hartridge sighed, looking at Elizabeth, who was holding back tears. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Hartridge said. "I'm sorry about your personal struggles, but I have to protect the board's interests. If you need anything, contact my office. I'm not a family court judge, but I won't let Jordan drag the company down." With that, Elizabeth let out a shaky breath. She had achieved a small but crucial victory, yet she couldn't shake the nagging sense that Jordan, humiliated and cornered, was far from finished. She left the skyscraper, stepping out into the bright Dallas sun, uncertain, but determined. Little did she know this chapter was only the start of a far more explosive confrontation, one that would involve security teams, sudden betrayals, and a twist that would bring Jordan himself to his knees. Life outside the mansion was lonely, but Elizabeth was thankful for the reprieve from Ava's manipulations. She rented a small apartment near downtown Austin and used what funds she had left to secure her basic needs, while Michelle continued to press for a financial freeze on Jordan's assets. In the weeks following the tense board meeting, Jordan went surprisingly quiet. No more legal letters arrived. No more credit lines were sabotaged. He didn't attempt to contact Elizabeth, nor did Ava. Instead, it seemed as though they had retreated into some silent fortress, likely strategizing their next move. Elizabeth took advantage of the lull. She reconnected with old friends and mentors, explaining partially at least what she was going through. While many were shocked, they offered support in the form of references, moral encouragement, and occasional leads for a stable job or a business partnership. Despite the heartbreak, Elizabeth discovered a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a passive bystander in Jordan's world. She had her own capabilities, her own strengths. Slowly, she started consulting for small tech firms, using her communications and PR background to help them craft compelling pitches. It wasn't a fortune, but it was honest work that reminded her she could stand on her own 2 feet. Then one evening, she received a phone call from an unknown number. A crisp, professional voice greeted her. "Hello, Elizabeth. This is Patricia Carlson. I'm an executive assistant at Tesla, working under Elon Musk's leadership team." Elizabeth's heart thudded. She had met Patricia briefly at a tech conference in Berlin 2 years ago, but they'd never exchanged more than pleasantries. "How can I help you?" Elizabeth asked, mind racing. Patricia hesitated. "I might have information relevant to your predicament with Jordan. Let's just say some of our legal divisions have been observing Ava Monroe for a while, and some red flags have come up." Red flags. Elizabeth's curiosity flared. "You're investigating her?" A slow exhale from the other end. "Our major concern is that she's potentially engaged in insider trading, or at least something that veers close to it. She's been known to manipulate powerful men to gain inside info on deals, especially around new technologies. We don't have direct evidence, but we do know that she's heavily involved in your husband's finances. We suspect she might be siphoning resources for her own agendas. Elizabeth's mind reeled. This was bigger than a domestic spat. Ava might be leveraging Jordan's resources and connections to stake her own claims in the tech world. That explained the sudden shifts in finances, the new trust accounts, and the lines of credit. Patricia continued. We want to bring her down, but we need more information. You, Elizabeth, might be in a unique position to gather that. Elizabeth tapped her fingers on the kitchen counter. Isn't that something your legal team handles? A rueful laugh. Yes, but we need Jordan's direct involvement. We suspect he's unwittingly giving her access to confidential materials through corporate crossovers or joint ventures. If you can help us prove it, we can kill two birds with one stone, protect Tesla's proprietary data, and help you gain leverage in your divorce. Elizabeth considered the offer. It was risky. If Ava was truly up to something illegal, Elizabeth could expose herself to potential backlash, but the lure of finally getting the upper hand was strong. I'll do what I can, Elizabeth replied cautiously. But how do I communicate with you about this? Patricia gave her a secure email address and instructions on how to encrypt files. And one more thing, Elizabeth Patricia said, before hanging up. People like Ava are cunning. She'll anticipate your every move. Don't trust phone lines or any device that Jordan has access to. Be careful. Elizabeth thanked her and ended the call. Adrenaline coursing through her. For the next few days, she scoured her digital archives for anything that might hint at insider information. Jordan's old emails messages about collaborations with major tech companies like Tesla or Amazon, documents that Ava might have manipulated anything that showed a trail of questionable activity. She found a few suspicious threads, forwarded emails from Jordan's corporate account that were CC'd to Ava's personal address. Attachments relating to Tesla's project Next Gen Battery were among them, though none of this was strictly proof of wrongdoing yet. Elizabeth compiled what she could and sent them to the secure email Patricia provided. In response, Patricia confirmed that these were valuable leads, but incomplete. Keep digging, she urged, and let me know if you get direct evidence of deals or monetary gains tied to these inside details. Meanwhile, Michelle Elizabeth's lawyer was preparing for a preliminary hearing to freeze some of Jordan's assets. She insisted Elizabeth come to court to testify about the financial abuse and the suspicious activities they had uncovered. But Jordan's side surprised them by agreeing to a partial freeze without argument. That's strange, Michelle said, tapping a pen against the conference table. Why would he agree so easily? Elizabeth shrugged, perplexed. Maybe he realizes fighting me will look bad in front of the board. But Michelle wasn't convinced. I suspect he's preparing a bigger move. Be vigilant. He may have more leverage than we know. The next morning, Elizabeth received an unsolicited text from Jordan. We need to talk, face to face. She felt a swirl of conflicting emotions, anger, sorrow, curiosity. But she knew she had to tread carefully. She agreed to meet him in a public place, a cafe near the courthouse, where she could keep the upper hand. When Jordan arrived, he looked tired, as though the weight of his troubles had worn him down. He offered a half smile, which Elizabeth did not return. Liz? He began using the old nickname he once uttered, with affection. Things got out of hand. She crossed her arms. You think? He sighed, scanning her face for warmth that was no longer there. I want to settle this amicably. We can discuss spousal support, property divisions, everything. No need for a long, nasty court battle. Elizabeth let the silence hover. She wasn't naive enough to believe him at face value. Amicably. Are you telling me Ava is out of the picture? Jordan's shoulders tensed. This is about you and me, not her. Look, maybe I got carried away with Ava's advice. She's a brilliant attorney. She's manipulative, Elizabeth cut in sharply. He brushed the point aside. Regardless, I'm willing to compromise, but I need you to lay off this insider trading nonsense. It's reckless. You're endangering my reputation. Elizabeth realized then that Jordan knew she'd been snooping into his communications. Perhaps Tesla's legal inquiries had begun reverberating in his circle. She saw the fear in his eyes. He was worried, if not about losing her, then about losing his empire. You made me the enemy, Elizabeth replied, in a hushed, trembling tone. When you let your mistress cut off my cards and throw me out of my home. Jordan looked away, shame flickering on his face. I didn't handle that well. But you have to understand the pressure I'm under with these deals. She waited, letting him squirm. Then he continued. You'll get a fair share. I promise. I just need you to stop meddling in my professional affairs, especially with Tesla or any other major collaborators. You'll ruin me if you do. A bitter laugh escaped Elizabeth. She thought of all the times she had stood beside him, protecting him, representing him before powerful players, forging alliances that were crucial to his success. Now he was pleading for her, not to ruin him. The irony nearly choked her. Before she could respond, Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and muttered a soft curse. I have to go, he said, throwing some cash on the table for their untouched coffees. Elizabeth watched him leave a mixture of pity and disdain swirling in her stomach. It was obvious he was desperate, but was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, or a ploy to keep her from uncovering more incriminating information about Ava? That question lingered as she returned to her apartment, drained. However, a new email from Patricia waited in her inbox. It contained an attachment, a partial timeline of suspicious trades linked to accounts rumored to be controlled by Ava Monroe. There were large bets placed on Tesla's stock ahead of public announcements. Gains in the tens of millions. This is huge, Elizabeth thought. If she connected these trades to emails or calls between Jordan and Ava, it could be the smoking gun. And while Elizabeth had no intention of going to the feds on her own, Tesla's legal team could bury Ava, and by extension, Jordan's complicity, if he was involved. Elizabeth clutched her phone, anxiety coursing through her. She was walking a razor's edge. One false step, and Jordan might retaliate more fiercely, or Ava might strike. But a successful strike against Ava could free Elizabeth from this entire ordeal, giving her the leverage to secure a fair divorce settlement, or even land Jordan in deeper trouble, depending on his role. She reached for her phone to text Patricia when it buzzed in her hand. A call from an unknown number again. Tentatively, Elizabeth answered. A man's voice greeted her calm and steady. Hello, Ms. Alberts. My name is Gregory Shaw. I'm part of CEO David Hartridge's legal counsel. He asked me to follow up regarding the situation with your husband. Elizabeth's heart skipped. Hartridge's legal counsel. We understand from Mr. Hartridge's conversation with you that there might be unethical or even illegal behavior in play. Gregory continued. The board is concerned about potential liability if Jordan's personal dealings spill into our corporate structure. We can't risk another scandal. Mr. Hartridge would like to assist you discreetly." Elizabeth exhaled slowly. She was on the cusp of powerful alliances forming against Jordan and Ava, but the more people got involved, the more dangerous it felt. Gregory concluded, "We'll be in touch with your lawyer. If you have any crucial evidence, Mr. Hartridge suggests you keep it secure. He wants to avoid a public meltdown, but he's prepared to do what's necessary to protect the company's interests, and that includes supporting you in your legal disputes, if it comes to that." Hanging up. Elizabeth felt a measure of validation. The cracks in Jordan's seemingly untouchable world were growing. Perhaps justice would prevail. Yet as she prepared to finalize the next round of documents for Michelle, a gnawing worry kept her awake at night. Cornered animals are the most dangerous, and Jordan, though once gentle and loving, had shown he could be ruthless when threatened. She braced herself for the storm that was surely coming. The next time Elizabeth saw Jordan in person, it wasn't by chance or a carefully arranged meeting. It was at the headquarters of Hartridge's conglomerate in Dallas. A sudden emergency board session had been called to address urgent corporate matters, and Elizabeth, having been notified by Gregory Shaw, arrived prepared. She walked into the reception area, her heart pounding with anticipation. Michelle Liu had insisted on accompanying her, but at the last minute she was called to handle a crucial filing. Elizabeth went alone, relying on the moral support from Gregory and the knowledge that Hartridge wanted the truth on record. Jordan was already inside the boardroom with Ava, who paced like a clad tiger. When Elizabeth entered, they both snapped their heads in her direction. Ava's glare could have sliced glass. Jordan's face was inscrutable, tense, angry, but also tinged with fear. Hartridge arrived moments later, trailed by a few board members and legal advisors. He wasted no time in stating the purpose of the meeting. "Allegations have come to my attention that Ms. Monroe has been engaging in stock trades leveraging proprietary information from Jordan's company and potentially from our own collaborations. We need to clarify the truth. Now." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Ava's jaw clenched. "This is preposterous," she began. "We demand to see your proof." Hartridge nodded to one of his advisors, who distributed printed documents, timelines of suspicious trades, tied to accounts flagged by Tesla's legal team, along with correspondences that Elizabeth and Patricia had pieced together. Jordan snatched a packet from the advisor. His eyes swept over the page's color, draining from his face. Ava's lips thinned, and for a moment Elizabeth could see the faintest flicker of panic in her eyes. Hartridge pinned them with a stern gaze. "Jordan, you've been a valuable partner. I don't want to see your personal life derail your professional standing, but this is bigger than your marriage. Insider trading is a federal crime, and if Miss Monroe is using your business resources to pull this off, you're implicated." Ava recovered quickly. She placed a hand on Jordan's arm, her voice smooth. "This is a misunderstanding, David. Anyone can align stock trades with corporate announcements. It's called speculation." Elizabeth decided enough was enough. She stood. "Speculation is one thing, but forwarding private emails, entire business proposals, and preliminary press releases is not speculation. I've seen the messages. You're literally discussing the best times to execute trades based on announcements that hadn't been made public yet." Ava whirled on Elizabeth. "You have no legal standing to claim that. You're just a scorned wife trying to sabotage Jordan and me." Elizabeth's blood boiled. "We'll let the evidence speak. There are even time-stamped emails from Jordan's corporate account sent to your personal email, Ms. Monroe, discussing upcoming expansions and product launches. Then trades were executed in your name or trusts linked to you within hours. A hush followed. Jordan's hands shook slightly. He seemed torn between denial and guilt. After all, the evidence was damning. If he denied it outright, he'd appear foolish. But if he admitted his involvement, he risked criminal charges and the wrath of the board. Hartridge leaned forward, his voice firm. Jordan, I need answers. Were you aware of these trades? Jordan stared at the table, words refusing to form. Finally, he managed, Ava said it was all above board, that it was just normal investing. Ava let out a short laugh, but it sounded hollow. If you want to scapegoat me, Jordan, think carefully, she warned. We made certain deals in your name as well. Your signatures are on plenty of documents. The entire boardroom seemed to hold its breath. Hartridge addressed one of his legal advisors. Have we sent this to the SEC? Not yet, the advisor responded. We wanted to confront them first. Jordan shot to his feet, panic etched on his face. No need to escalate it. We can handle this internally. If I undo the trades, repay any gains, repay tens of millions of dollars, Hartridge asked. And that would just be the tip of the iceberg if the SEC digs deeper. This is out of our hands if they launch a formal investigation. Elizabeth watched Jordan unravel. This was the man who had once been so composed, so unstoppable. Now he was cornered, sweat beading on his forehead. Ava, too, looked like a wild animal backed into a corner, eyes darting around the room. At that moment, a building security guard appeared at the door, knocking softly. Mr. Hartridge, you asked for security on standby, he announced quietly. Thank you, Hartridge replied, his tone like steel. I believe we might need you. Ava's eyes flitted toward the door, then back to Hartridge. She adopted a pleading tone. David, you know me. I've handled legal matters for some of the biggest players in the industry. I would never do anything to jeopardize your trust. Hartridge's face remained stony. I trusted Jordan, not you. And this evidence suggests you're at the center of a major ethical breach. If you don't have a verifiable explanation for each of these trades and how you obtained insider information, I have no choice but to protect the company from liability. Suddenly, Jordan snapped. Fear twisted into anger, and he pointed a trembling finger at Elizabeth. You did this. You ruined everything because you couldn't handle that I moved on. Elizabeth steadied her breathing, preparing to reply. But Hartridge cut in calm yet firm. Don't blame her for your poor decisions. You let your personal affair become a corporate liability. Something in Jordan cracked. He lunged toward Elizabeth as if to grab her documents or her phone, an irrational move likely spurred by desperation. But he never made contact. In a blink, the security guard stepped forward and intercepted Jordan, gripping his arms. Stand down, sir, the guard said, voice authoritative. Jordan struggled, but the guard was a solid wall of muscle. Ava shrieked. Let him go. This is a private matter. Hartridge shook his head, anger coloring his features. You just attempted to assault someone in my boardroom. Security remove Mr. Alberts from the premises. Jordan's eyes widened in disbelief. You can't do that. I'm on the board. Not anymore, Hartridge said grimly. I can and I will. You're suspended, pending an internal investigation. Once that concludes, we'll determine your status. Now go and take Ms. Monroe with you. A second guard stepped in, guiding Ava toward the door, as she protested threatening lawsuits and defamation claims. But her words rang hollow, overshadowed by the looming spectre of an SEC investigation. Elizabeth stood off to the side, stunned by how quickly it had escalated from a tension-filled meeting to an outright meltdown. As Jordan and Ava were led out, Jordan craned his neck to shout at her, "You'll pay for this, Elizabeth. Don't think you've won." But the threat carried little weight now. In that moment, Elizabeth felt the mixture of triumph and sorrow that comes with toppling a man she once loved. She hadn't wanted to see Jordan destroyed, only to protect herself and the life they had built together. But Jordan's actions and Ava's ambition had forced her hand. Hartridge dismissed the board members soon after instructing his legal team to cooperate fully with any investigations. He turned to Elizabeth with a sympathetic frown. "I'm sorry you had to endure this, Miss Alberts. I assure you we'll handle it lawfully. Whatever personal or marital disputes remain, I hope you find closure." Elizabeth gave him a small nod. "Thank you. I appreciate your fairness." She gathered her documents and left the skyscraper, the bright Texas sun striking her face as she stepped onto the street. The entire drama replayed in her mind. He let his mistress cut off my cards, but the CEO called security on him. She thought a bitter yet satisfying sense of irony spreading in her chest. She wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Legal battles would continue, depositions would be taken, and the divorce was far from final. But in this pivotal moment, she had taken back her power, standing against the storm that Jordan and Ava had unleashed. And for the first time in months, Elizabeth felt a glimmer of hope that she might in the end be free from their tyranny. In the weeks that followed, word spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up on rumors of insider trading linked to a high-profile tech investor, hinting that a major name was under investigation. It didn't take long for the rumor mill to connect the dots to Jordan Alberts and his mysterious attorney-turned-partner, Ava Monroe. Elizabeth watched from the sidelines, inundated with calls and messages from acquaintances, reporters, and sometimes even old college classmates she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored most of them, preferring to let the legal process unfold without adding fuel to the media frenzy. Jordan, under immense legal and financial pressure, attempted to strike a deal if Elizabeth agreed to keep quiet and not testify against him or Ava. Regarding insider trading, he would give her a generous divorce settlement. The settlement included alimony, a hefty lump sum, and properties that would secure her financial future. However, Elizabeth refused any agreement that required her to lie or withhold the truth if subpoenaed. Nonetheless, she allowed her lawyer Michelle to work out a fair settlement that didn't involve perjury. Eventually, Jordan capitulated, realizing he had to salvage what he could from the marriage and business meltdown. The final settlement granted Elizabeth a significant portion of the assets, the mansion by Lake Travis, ironically, and a sizable share of Jordan's original tech startup. Meanwhile, Ava disappeared from the public eye, her reputation in tatters. Rumors surfaced that she'd fled the country perhaps to avoid legal repercussions, while others suggested she was hiding out in some luxury villa, waiting for the storm to pass. Either way, her days of meddling in Jordan's finances seemed to be over. Elizabeth didn't celebrate Jordan's downfall. She quietly grieved the end of a marriage that had started in love and partnership, yet she also felt relief and a renewed sense of self. She returned to the Lake Travis mansion, deciding whether to keep it or sell. The sweeping views of the water brought back memories, some of which felt like knives to her heart, others that warmed her soul. She began a new chapter in her life, leveraging her PR skills to start a consultancy focused on helping women entrepreneurs navigate both business and personal challenges. She named it Phoenix Rose Consulting, symbolizing rebirth and resilience. To her surprise, she found more joy in championing other women than she ever did, standing behind Jordan at glitzy galas. She kept in touch with Patricia from Tesla, who occasionally updated her on the ongoing investigations. Whether Jordan faced criminal charges depended on further evidence. But at least for Elizabeth, the immediate threat to her assets and well-being had lifted. David Hartridge reached out, once inviting Elizabeth to a dinner with the board, presumably to mend fences. Elizabeth politely declined. She had no desire to relive the tension of board meetings or navigate corporate politics, where her personal life became public fodder. She was grateful for Hartridge's stance, but preferred to build her future away from the chaos. In moments of solitude, Elizabeth reflected on the entire ordeal. She'd once believed that love, loyalty, and shared ambition could conquer anything. Yet she also realized that unchecked power and ego could corrode even the strongest of bonds. Jordan's betrayal had been a painful lesson, but it set her free to discover her own strengths and a life not tethered to someone else's rising star. Yes, heartbreak lingered, and healing was an ongoing process. But Elizabeth found herself waking each day with a sense of purpose. She'd gather with female founders at local co-working spaces, host workshops on media relations, and offer moral support to those feeling overshadowed by bigger players. Each time she saw a spark of confidence ignite in another woman's eyes, she felt her own sense of wholeness return. In time, Elizabeth would finalize the divorce, sign the deeds, and officially start over. A sense of calm settled within her, like the slow, tranquil waves on Lake Travis at dawn. Her story, the humiliating card cancellations, the public meltdown, the mistress's meddling, would become a cautionary tale, one she shared sparingly, only when it might help others. Despite the scars, Elizabeth refused to let bitterness define her. She chose growth empathy and a belief that with the right support, anyone can rise from the ashes more formidable than before. Just as Elizabeth thought she had reached stable ground, fate tossed her another curveball. A month after the settlement, Michelle called her urgently. "The feds want to depose you," she said. "They uncovered new evidence Jordan may be involved in deeper crimes, bribery, money laundering. Ava might have orchestrated a network." Elizabeth's stomach dropped. Jordan never mentioned anything like that. "They've found offshore transactions and documents with his signature," Michelle said grimly. 2 days later, Elizabeth sat in a stark federal office, flanked by Michelle and 2 serious agents. They questioned her about Jordan's finances, Ava's role, the card cancellations, and philanthropic events that may have masked backdoor deals. Elizabeth stuck to the facts. She neither speculated nor dramatized. One agent, impressed, said, "You've been very helpful, Ms. Alberts. This case is significant." She left emotionally drained but relieved. She hadn't been dragged down with Jordan, but the storm wasn't over. Whispers followed Jordan was hiding at a secluded ranch, dodging the press. Ava had vanished. More subpoenas were issued. An indictment loomed. Elizabeth stayed focused on her consultancy, channeling stress into helping other women navigate business pitfalls. Her story, once painful, became a symbol of warning and strength. Then came the headlines: Jordan Alberts indicted for insider trading, fraud, and obstruction. Ava was named but still missing. The scandal rocked the tech world. Elizabeth issued a single statement. "I'm saddened by Jordan's choices. I've cooperated fully with authorities, and continue to rebuild my life. Eventually, Jordan pled guilty to a lesser charge, offering a tearful courtroom apology. Elizabeth watched from home, tears in her eyes, not from triumph, but quiet grief for the man she once loved. Still, she understood consequences had to follow actions. That night, beneath the soft moonlight over Lake Travis, Elizabeth allowed herself one last cry for the past that died and the hope still waiting ahead. Life has a way of testing our fortitude when we least expect it. Elizabeth Alberts began this journey as a devoted wife, only to see her world upended by betrayal and financial sabotage. Yet what she lost in illusions, she gained in unbreakable resilience. Standing up to powerful forces and calling out wrongdoing isn't easy, but it's sometimes the only way to protect your dignity and your future. If you found this story gripping, insightful, or inspiring, we invite you to be a part of our community. Like this video, share it with friends who need a reminder that courage can emerge from chaos, and subscribe for more real-life drama and empowering tales. Let Elizabeth's story serve as a beacon, no matter how ruthless the betrayal. There's always a path to reclaim your power and build a brighter tomorrow. You too can rise like a phoenix.